I'm going to take some time to talk about risk. Right now, in the beginning of 2022, there is a lot of outrage and fear and panic being sold to generate profits, to get clicks and all of that kind of stuff. So when it comes to risk, we reward successful risk takers, but most risk takers are not successful. And in early 2020, when we add COVID to the mix, that just adds another element of risk to everyone in society. And we started to become divided around the concept of risk. I mean, there will always be risks. And if you rely on the government or powerful entities to protect you, that is also risky. The risk that comes from a lack of freedom is historically a very deadly one that we have fought for centuries. But as I dive into this risk concept, it's important to recognize that now in 2022, we are in the least risky time of all of human history. You can look at Steven Pinker's work, for example, to show the human progress that has gotten us to where we are right now. In many elements, we don't really know what to do because we are so safe. But how we process that is very, very different. I teach teenagers, and one of the things that I tell them is that when you're young, your concept of high and low, good and bad is very, very small. Your highs are about here and your lows are about here. So a breakup or something like that. And then, winning hitting the winning goal in your game is like here. And then you get married, you have kids, you lose people, you reach goals. And what happens is your highs get a little bit pushed up and your lows get pushed a little bit down, and your understanding of highs and lows just expand as you get older. And what you start to realize is that the greatest highs and the lowest lows come from the biggest risks and the most responsibilities that you take on. But our perception of risk is all messed up right now. When there is pushback against COVID restrictions, it's not against restrictions. I'm an economics teacher, and it's simply about calculating costs and trade-offs. We are often ignoring the externalities of COVID regulations, and that's not the way to approach this. There are risks to everything. There are risks to staying inside. There are risks to wearing a mask. There are risks to not wearing a mask. There are risks to going out. Everything has its calculable risks. For example, I was in Malibu last week and I was talking to someone who does regular beach cleanups, and he said last week he cleaned up 1,000 masks from the beach in Malibu. Does that mean that masks are bad? No, of course not. But that's an externality that we need to calculate. There is a risk to all of these masks being put on the beaches and in our oceans and things like that. That's a risk. Youth anxiety and depression is at an all-time high. Suicides, drug overdoses. I have seen this stuff at a point where I've never seen it before in 15 years of teaching. That is a risk too. Keeping kids isolated, keeping them free from the risks of COVID to the degree that it even did that also has risks. And a lot of things have gotten silenced. I got shadow banned on my social media because I talked about the risks of vaccine use. I got the booster. I believe that the vaccines are incredible for preventing serious illness and death, especially for older or at-risk people, but they're not without risks. The fact that they're being broadcast on Sesame Street and all of the mainstream media as being safe and effective without any kind of informed consent or any kind of understanding. I talked to a lot of people that said no one has had an adverse reaction, a serious adverse reaction from the vaccine. That's not true. They're being shielded and censored from that information. But let me ask you, should we be allowed to find out the risks of things that are generally safe? For example, how many people die from wearing seatbelts? Whether they crash into a pond and drown, or they're stuck in a fire and the buckle melts and they can't get out because of their seatbelt. The answer is some. Far more people are saved by seatbelts than killed by seatbelts, but some are killed. Should we be allowed to talk about the people who have died from seatbelts? I say yes. But the fear is that if we talk about that risk, then people will refuse to wear seatbelts because they can't make up their own decisions or think for themselves, and therefore more deaths will occur. But let me ask you, can we be trusted with the full truth? Or do we need to just trust powerful institutions to paint with a wide brush and shield us from the complicated nuance involved in all of these risks? I honestly don't know. But I do know this: when things are being censored and shut down from public view, there is incremental change going on under the guise of mitigating risks. But incremental change toward authoritarian measures is by design structured in such a way that there is no appropriate place to put your foot down and say stop. It's the frog in boiling water, and it happens so slowly. So we say COVID could kill us next week, so I'm gonna push off that and take a possible risk down the road of severe depression or something like that, because I can deal with that down the road. But as in 2022, we here in America have never been safer, essentially, in many significant ways. The smaller risks seem greater. This is along the lines of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that what seems like a threat, the higher up you go on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the more safe you are. But what seems like a risk, what is perceived as risk, gets greater. This is also considered under the psychological idea of prevalence-induced concept change. And I've done videos on that in the past. But this can be applied to all kinds of things that are very divisive right now in society, from COVID, from what is kind of pejoratively called wokeness. Concepts like microaggressions and whiteness and all of that kind of stuff was created by elites. It wasn't by truly oppressed people. It was by university professors at like the top Harvard Law School and things like that. Because as you rise up, what is deemed oppressive and racist becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And to the youth today, the people that I deal with, what is seen as a threat, a risk. We have anxiety for a reason. Evolutionarily, there's a saber-toothed tiger coming that gets me anxious because my life is being threatened. What is deemed as a saber-toothed tiger has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's very real to us. But what we need to do to all of us, and especially to the youth, is encourage them to become braver, not less afraid. Don't shield them from what scares them. Equip them with the tools to overcome it. I would love to know your thoughts in the comments below.